Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the past is in the present. So it's an interesting thing to be talking about time and past, present, and future. But when we invoke the past, we're invoking it in this moment, in the present. And we bring that past alive in a multitude of ways that may or may not serve us. Good morning. Good morning. I am loved by God. Wonderful to have you joining us this morning. So before we get started talking about how the past is in the present, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present, right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So the past is in the present. Really, that's the only place the past actually exists. Why is that, or how could that possibly be? Well, it is in this moment that we invoke the past. It is in this moment that we remember, we reassemble, we recreate, and oftentimes we recreate the past over and over and over in the same way. However, we can change the past. So there may be objectively verifiable events that occurred, for example, in the past. But what is changeable is the way we interpret those events, the lens through which we perceive those events and interpret them. And in fact, we are rewriting history all the time. They say that history goes to the victor. In other words, who writes history? The history that we study. Typically, it's the victors, the people who won. So they are the ones that get to celebrate their achievements, for example. And that perspective is certainly a limited perspective. We're seeing a change of history now as we are coming into greater acknowledgement of people's, indigenous peoples and people of color, and coming into a greater recognition and bringing their stories forward into our awareness, into our consciousness. And therefore, we're rewriting history. The heroes, many of the heroes of history are being displaced because new perspectives, new information has come to light or has become popularized so that these previously lauded heroes are now falling from grace when different factors are taken into consideration in history. And the beautiful thing about this malleability of history is that we can bring it to our own lives. That the events of our lives, although we most often tell the same story over and over and over in the same way, the beauty is that we can revisit these experiences with new perspectives as well, with a new lens. So one of the things that I discover in my work with clients is that so many of our life decisions about who we are, about how the world is, are made when we are children. And when we are children, we are tremendously suggestible. Our brain waves are represent different states that are suggestible, sort of hypnotic states. It's why little kids can learn so easily, because they're just sort of an open book. Their brains are wired in a way to be able to receive and integrate all kinds of information. And that information is often not healthy, not always life affirming. If we get messages from parents that we're not good enough, or you should be ashamed, or we're not smart enough, or we're too this, or we're not enough that, those messages go in and are retained. Experiences are embodied more fully, more completely, in such a way that they can follow us through our lives, that they can shape the experience of our lives in profound ways. And what I see over and over is that by revisiting some of these events that have been so formative for so many of us, we can revisit them with a greater perspective. We can revisit them from a vantage point that gives us more information, not unlike what we're seeing with history, where there's more information out there. We just need to bring it to the fore. So what I see, so I am loved by God says that's exactly what I'm going through, and I don't know how to let go of the negative. So it's important to recognize that the negative is programmed, it's patterned in so many ways. And if you have particular events that you can go back to, you can see, I'll give an example. I was speaking with a client, and they had this experience of being unseen. They were a kid. They were pretending to be asleep in the middle of the floor with all these adults around, and their little cousin was playing on top of them. while they were pretending to be asleep. Their experience was that they weren't seen, that nobody noticed them, that nobody cared. And what was amazing and wonderful is that they had this image, like a photograph in their head. And we stood back as adults looking at that photograph. And I said, is there any way that you could miss that kid sleeping on the floor? Is there any way you couldn't see her? And she realized that she was seen, that everybody was playing along with her, allowing her to pretend that she was sleeping, sort of going along with the game. And that revelation changed everything for her, because she recognized that, in fact, she was seen and that people were aligned with her. And so the perception of the child shifted in such a way that all that past pain was released and kind of came up into the present, like dominoes tumbling over, to release that in the present. So when you talk about not being able to release the negative, one way to do that is to really deliberately, consciously shift your focus to the positive, to start actively practicing focus on the positive. Now, I know that's not necessarily an easy thing, particularly when you're overwhelmed with negativity. I get that. And so another way to approach this that I've found very, very powerful is, instead of trying to fight off the negative, to recognize it, to acknowledge it, to say, okay, what's going on here? To approach whatever those negative thoughts are with curiosity and compassion. Curiosity is the antidote to judgment. When one of the reasons that negativity can persist, or difficult patterns, negative patterns, one of the reasons they can persist is because we try to suppress them. And in trying to suppress them, we're focusing all our attention and our energy on really affirming that that's there, right? We're resisting it, and while we're resisting it, we're just acknowledging it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. So when we stop resisting it, we open the potential for that to flow and move, for that energy to flow and move. That's one. When we approach with curiosity and compassion, to say, wow, what do I have to be thinking to be feeling all these negative feelings? Or where did all that negative thought come from? Is it mine? Or is it something that was imposed on me? Because if it was imposed on me, as we become aware of that, we can recognize, maybe I have choice. Maybe the person or the situation that imposed that on me had some challenges. Maybe it's not the authority that I should be granting. Maybe I shouldn't be granting authority to that situation or that person to have made that judgment on me. And if I'm making those judgments on myself, if there are things that I have shame or guilt or grief around, believe me, I went through a very profound period reconciling with my shame and my grief. The thing to do is to be curious, to say, what must I have been feeling, or what must that person have been feeling or thinking to have acted in that way? So oftentimes, if we've done something that we have shame around, it's that we were really deeply disconnected, that we were acting out our own pain, perhaps. And so to be able to find compassion for that self that was so suffering so deeply that they acted out in the world in a particular way, we can find perhaps a love for that person, an understanding for that person that we were, or another person. We can absolve ourselves of the guilt and the shame because we have a deeper understanding of the pain that was behind it. And we can maybe then release it. We can, through compassion, curiosity, understanding, we can release the judgment. And that allows us to be free, at least freer of the negative. So I'm wondering if this speaks to you. I'm wondering if this makes any sense. Another pathway to releasing the negative is actually not releasing it at all, but expanding to include it. So what I have noticed is that as Westerners, we're not so great at releasing stuff, letting stuff go. We're more acquisition oriented. That's what we're conditioned into. And so rather than saying, just let it go, because it's like, if I knew how to let it go, believe me, I would let it go. Rather than just saying, let it go, we can expand to include. So there's negativity, we can expand to include that. In other words, we're accepting it rather than reviling it. We're not trying to exile it. We're not trying to purge it. We're recognizing that that's part of me. It's like embracing the shadow. And when we expand to include, what is also the case is that we're including that, but we're not limited to that. We're so much more than that. We're the darkness, we're the light, we're all the colors and shades in between. And as we expand to include all of it, we become none of it, which is the same thing as letting go. Because we're not identified by any particular portion of it. We are the totality of it, and we're the all and nothing. So that's another way to be able to let go of the negative, because it actually takes conscious and deliberate effort to hold on to the negative, right? We have to keep reinforcing it. We have to keep bringing it into the present moment. We have to keep recreating it over and over again. And when we recognize that we're putting out all this energy to keep this pattern going, it's like, what's up with that? What's going on with that? Well, when we think thoughts, when we feel feelings, there's a chemistry set that is produced with that thought and with those emotions. And that chemistry set is something that sometimes we get addicted to. We're so used to getting that hit of whatever those chemicals are. We're so used to it that we'll often recreate it so that we can feel it some more. Because for some of us, the only feelings we feel are negative feelings. So if we want to feel something, we'll create the negative feelings so that we can feel alive, so that we can feel. And so it literally takes practice to feel other things. So there's a wonderful program called DNRS, Dynamic Neuro Retraining System. And it's about, and if you can find it on retrainingthebrain.com, I think. It's either retrainingthebrain.com or .org. I think it's .com. But it's about the limbic system. The limbic system is our fight or flight mechanism. It gets locked into overdrive. And it produces all these chemicals that we then get addicted to. And when it's in fight or flight mode, it starts affecting our physiology, not just with the chemicals that it's releasing around the initial trigger, but also by then affecting those chemicals then affect the whole system in all kinds of ways. And different systems shut down and react, and that's where we get disease, dis-ease, stress-induced dis-ease, particularly. So how do we retrain it? We retrain it by consciously and deliberately practicing better feelings. Feelings of that at least get closer to joy, that at least get closer to relief, freedom, happiness, ease, safety. Those feelings, those emotions have different chemistry attended to them. And so if we can do things to create that better chemistry, one of the chemical companies has a slogan of better life through chemistry. Well, we can be our own chemistry sets. We are our own chemistry sets. We just don't use that in a deliberate way. So most of our ruminations are about the past, or we project the past into the future with all kinds of fear as well. But all these things are keeping us from really being present in this moment, right? We're recreating, we're telling ourselves stories that generate all these emotions, that generate all this chemistry, that in turn keep generating the emotions, and it's a spiral from there. It can be an upward or a downward spiral. It actually can be an upward spiral. We do have the capability to be generating an upward positive spiral. It takes work, particularly if you're locked in that negative pattern. It takes deliberate intention, but it can be done. And so how we bring the past into the present shapes our experience. And so if there are traumatic stories that you keep recreating from your past, like an embarrassing moment that you keep replaying and replaying and replaying, figure out how to rewrite that. Whether it's by approaching the situation with curiosity and compassion, or standing back to get a broader picture that maybe you can see some of the other influences at work, to turning down the volume in your mind, or if it's in bright color, making something black and white, for example. If you're playing the movie over and over, try playing it backwards. There are all kinds of ways that we can shift our experience in very deliberate fashion. So we really do have the ability to shift our reality, to rewrite history, and to change not only our present, but our past and our future as well. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. And it's always a pleasure and a privilege to have this time to share with you, musing about what it is to be human. So you too, have a great weekend, and so much love to you. Until next time.